The bruise on Fiona Baker's face told a story she couldn't hide as she stepped off the stagecoach into the dusty streets of Promise Creek, Wyoming Territory, 1876. She clutched her worn Bible to her chest like armor, her knuckles white against the faded leather binding, while her other hand gripped a small carpet bag containing everything she owned in this world. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the main street as curious onlookers watched another mail-order bride arrive to meet her fate. Fiona kept her eyes downcast, the purple-yellow bruise on her right cheekbone impossible to conceal despite her efforts with powder. At 22, she had already experienced enough hardship to last a lifetime. Boston had offered her nothing but heartache after her parents' deaths, and the mail-order bride advertisement had seemed her only escape from a life spiraling toward desperation. She scanned the crowd nervously, looking for the man who was to be her husband, a rancher named Harold Jenkins who had described himself as a successful cattleman seeking a proper Christian wife. Her stomach tightened as she realized no one was stepping forward to claim her. "Miss Baker?" A young boy, no more than 12, approached her hesitantly. "Mr. Jenkins asked me to give you this." He thrust a crumpled envelope into her hands before darting away. Fiona's fingers trembled as she opened it, reading the hastily scrawled note. "Changed my mind. Found another. Sorry for your trouble." Nothing more. No offer to help, no suggestion of what she should do next in this strange town where she knew no one. A lump formed in her throat as she realized the full weight of her situation. Her funds were depleted from the journey west. She had no return ticket, nowhere to go, and night was falling in an unfamiliar town. "Looks like you've been left high and dry." The voice was deep and rough-edged, but not unkind. Fiona turned to find a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky watching her. His clothes were dusty from the trail, a simple cotton shirt, worn denim pants, and a wide-brimmed hat that had seen better days. He wasn't polished like the gentleman back east, but there was something honest in his weathered face. "I'm Samuel Hawkins," he said, removing his hat and revealing thick chestnut hair. "Town blacksmith. And you look like you could use some help." "I'm fine, thank you," Fiona replied automatically, pride making her voice stiffer than intended. She tucked the letter into her pocket, willing herself not to cry. Samuel nodded toward her cheek, his expression darkening. "That's a nasty bruise you're carrying. Someone do that to you?" Fiona's hand flew to her face instinctively. "It's nothing. Doesn't look like nothing." His eyes were kind, but she detected a flicker of anger there, not directed at her, but at whoever had marked her. "Let me guess. Jenkins isn't coming?" She hesitated before giving a slight nod. Samuel sighed, looking down the dusty street. "There's a boarding house run by Widow Tompkins. She might have a room, but it'll cost you." "I don't have much money left," Fiona admitted, hating the weakness in her voice. Samuel seemed to consider something for a moment. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Baker." "Nothing improper," he added quickly, noting her alarmed expression. "I need help at my smithy. My sister kept my books and helped with customers before she married and moved to California last month. I'm useless with numbers and worse with correspondence." Fiona studied him warily. "I don't know anything about blacksmithing." A smile cracked across his face, transforming his serious expression. "I'm not asking you to shoe horses. But you look educated. Can you read, write, and cipher?" "Yes, of course. My father was a schoolteacher." "Then I'm offering you honest work. Room and board at my sister's old place behind the smithy, plus a small wage until you decide what you want to do. Stay in Promise Creek, move on, or go back east, whatever you choose." Fiona clutched her Bible tighter. It seemed too convenient, too easy. "Why would you help me? You don't know anything about me." Samuel's eyes flickered to the bruise again, then met hers directly. "Let's just say I recognize someone who needs a second chance when I see them." He paused. "My mother arrived here not much different than you. Mail-order bride with nothing but disappointment waiting for her." His jaw tightened briefly. No woman should be left stranded with nowhere to turn. Something in his steady gaze made Fiona believe him. Perhaps it was desperation, or perhaps it was the genuine concern she saw there, but she found herself nodding. Just until I decide what to do next. That's all I'm offering. Samuel agreed, reaching for her carpet bag. May I? Fiona reluctantly handed it over, following him down the dusty street. Several townspeople watched their progress with undisguised curiosity. She heard whispers following in their wake but kept her eyes forward, chin up despite the humiliation burning in her chest. Samuel's smithy stood at the edge of town, a large workshop with the distinctive smell of hot metal and coal hanging in the air. Behind it sat a small, neat cabin that looked well maintained if somewhat bare. My sister's place, Samuel explained, opening the door. It's simple, but it's clean. She took most of her things when she left, but the essentials are here. The cabin consisted of one main room with a small stove, a table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed in the corner, and a rocking chair near the single window. A curtained-off section presumably hid a washing area. It's perfect, Fiona said softly, overcome by the sudden kindness of this stranger when she had expected the worst. Samuel placed her bag on the table. There's a pump out back for water. Outhouse is there too. I live above the smithy, so you'll have your privacy. He hesitated at the door. Would you like to start tomorrow? 9 o'clock? Fiona nodded, not trusting her voice. I'll leave you to settle in, then. There's some food in the cupboard, not much, but enough for tonight. We can go to the general store tomorrow to stock up. As he turned to leave, Fiona found her voice. Mr. Hawkins? Thank you. His expression softened. Samuel. Or Sam. Mr. Hawkins was my father, and I'm nothing like him, thank God. With that cryptic statement, he left, closing the door gently behind him. Alone, Fiona finally allowed herself the luxury of tears. She cried for her lost parents, for the humiliation of being rejected by a man she'd never even met, for the fear that had driven her from Boston, and for the uncertain future that stretched before her. Then, wiping her eyes, she opened her Bible to the worn page marked by a faded ribbon. Psalm 23 stared back at her. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. She traced the familiar words with her finger, finding comfort in their constancy. Whatever tomorrow brought, she had survived today. For now, that would have to be enough. Morning came with the sounds of Promise Creek awakening, roosters crowing, horses nickering, the distant whistle of a train. Fiona had slept better than expected on the narrow bed, exhaustion overcoming the strangeness of her surroundings. She dressed carefully in her second-best dress, a modest blue cotton with only minimal mending at the cuffs, and pinned her auburn hair into a simple knot. The bruise looked worse in the small mirror hanging by the wash basin, the colors deepening to a mottled purple. She touched it gently, wincing at the tenderness. No amount of powder would hide it today. At precisely 9 o'clock, she knocked on the smithy door. The heat hit her immediately as she entered, a wave of warmth from the forge where Samuel was hammering a piece of glowing metal. He looked up at her entrance, nodded in greeting, and plunged the metal into a barrel of water. Steam hissed upward as he set down his tools and wiped his hands on a nearby cloth. Good morning, he said, his voice raised over the sizzle of cooling metal. Did you sleep well? Yes, thank you, Fiona replied, trying not to stare at the way his shirt clung to his shoulders, damp with sweat from the forge. She'd never seen a man at work like this before, and there was something fascinating about the raw strength evident in his movements. Samuel gestured toward a small desk in the corner, away from the heat of the forge but with a clear view of the workshop. That's where my sister kept the books. I'm afraid they're in a state. Faye was much more organized than I am. Fiona approached the desk, surveying the scattered papers, ledgers, and unopened mail. I see what you mean. I've been letting things slide since she left, Samuel admitted, looking slightly embarrassed. Customers come in, I do the work, sometimes I write it down, sometimes I don't. Sometimes they pay right away, sometimes they say they'll settle up later. He rubbed the back of his neck. It's a mess. I'll start putting things in order, Fiona said, sitting down and picking up the nearest ledger. Perhaps you could explain your system to me? Or what your system should be. Samuel gave a short laugh. That's assuming I have one. He moved closer, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Basically, I need to know who owes me money, how much I'm earning, what supplies I need to order, and when orders are due. Beyond that, I trust your judgment. For the next hour, he explained the basics of his business while Fiona took notes. The smithy wasn't just for horseshoes and wagon repairs. Samuel created everything from cooking implements to decorative ironwork, and his skills were clearly in demand throughout the county. As the morning progressed, customers began arriving. Fiona watched Samuel transform from the somewhat awkward man who couldn't explain his own bookkeeping to a confident craftsman who knew exactly what each piece of metal required. His hands, so large and powerful, could perform surprisingly delicate work when needed. Miss Baker? Samuel's voice broke into her thoughts. She realized with embarrassment that she'd been staring at his hands as he demonstrated a repair to a customer. Yes, Mr. Hawkins? She replied, sitting straighter. This is Mr. Peterson. He needs a receipt for the plow blade repair. Fiona quickly found the appropriate paper and wrote out the receipt, her handwriting neat and precise. Mr. Peterson, a weathered farmer in his 50s, studied her with undisguised curiosity. You're the mail-order bride that Jenkins stood up, he stated bluntly. Fiona felt her cheeks flush. Peterson, Samuel interrupted, his tone sharp. Miss Baker is my new clerk. Her arrangements with Jenkins are her business. The farmer shrugged. No offense meant. Just that Jenkins is a fool. Got himself a widow from Cheyenne instead, one with a bit of land to add to his. Always was more interested in property than people. He accepted the receipt from Fiona with a nod. Your handwriting's much neater than Hawkins. That's something. After he left, Fiona kept her eyes on the ledger, mortified. Is everyone in town going to mention it? Samuel sighed, returning to the forge. Probably. For a week or so. Small towns run on gossip until something more interesting comes along. He paused. I'm sorry. It's not fair to you. Life rarely is. Fiona replied, surprised by the bitterness in her own voice. Samuel studied her for a moment, his eyes falling to her bruise again. No, he agreed quietly. It rarely is. By noon, Fiona had created a basic organizational system for the paperwork and started a fresh ledger. Her head ached from the concentrated work and the heat of the forge, but she felt a satisfaction she hadn't experienced in months. It felt good to be useful again. Time for a break, Samuel announced, setting down his tools. Mrs. Green's cafe serves a decent meal. My treat. Fiona hesitated. I'm not sure I'm ready to face the whole town. You'll have to sooner or later, Samuel pointed out. Might as well be with someone who'll glare at anyone who says something unkind. That surprised a small laugh out of her. Do you glare often, Mr. Hawkins? Only when necessary, he replied with a hint of a smile. And I told you it's Samuel or Sam. The walk to the cafe was mercifully short, though Fiona felt every curious gaze that followed them. The cafe was busy with the noon crowd, ranchers, shopkeepers, and townspeople filling the small tables. A plump woman with steel-gray hair approached them, wiping her hands on her apron. Samuel Hawkins, twice in 1 week! Must be a special occasion. Her kind eyes turned to Fiona, widening slightly at the sight of the bruise but quickly returning to a welcoming smile. And who's this? Mrs. Green, this is Miss Fiona Baker. She's helping me get the smithy books in order, Samuel explained. Miss Baker, this is Mrs. Green, maker of the best apple pie in the territory. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Green, Fiona said politely. Likewise, dear. Come, I have a table in the corner. She led them through the room, ignoring the whispers that followed. Don't mind them, she said quietly to Fiona. Nothing better to do than wag their tongues. Once they were seated, Mrs. Green brought them each a plate of roast beef, potatoes, and green beans without asking what they wanted. Special of the day, she explained with a wink before bustling away. Samuel waited until she was gone before speaking. Mrs. Green knows everyone's business but keeps her opinions to herself. That's rare around here. Fiona nodded, picking up her fork. The food smelled wonderful, reminding her how little she'd eaten recently. The town seems established, she said, searching for a safe topic. Founded about 20 years ago. Started as a trading post, grew when the railway came through. Now we've got about 400 people in town proper, more in the surrounding ranches. Samuel cut into his beef. Where are you from originally? Boston. Fiona replied, then hesitated before adding, My parents died of influenza last year. I had been teaching at a small school, but... She trailed off, unwilling to explain how quickly her life had unraveled after their deaths. Samuel seemed to sense her reluctance. My mother was from Philadelphia. She never quite got used to the open spaces out here, but she made a life of it. His expression softened. She'd have liked you. Always believed in education. And your father? Fiona asked. Something hardened in Samuel's eyes. Rancher. Drank too much. Died 10 years ago when his horse threw him during a bender. He said it matter-of-factly, but Fiona detected old pain beneath the words. I'm sorry. Samuel shook his head. Don't be. He wasn't a good man. His eyes flickered to her bruise again, and understanding passed between them unspoken but clear. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Samuel spoke again. The Bruise. Was it? Your family in Boston? Fiona set down her fork, appetite suddenly diminished. No. After my parents died, I lost my teaching position when the school closed. I took work as a companion to an elderly woman, Mrs. Hargrove. Her son. She swallowed hard. He had expectations I wasn't willing to meet. When I refused him, he became insistent. Samuel's hand tightened on his knife. That's when he hit you? Yes. I left that night. Used what little savings I had to answer Mr. Jenkins' advertisement. She gave a humorless laugh. I thought I couldn't possibly have worse luck than I'd already had. Jenkins is a fool, Samuel said firmly. But his loss might be Promise Creek's gain. We could use a teacher here. Fiona looked up in surprise. There's no school? There's a building that's supposed to be a school. The last teacher left 6 months ago couldn't handle the uncivilized conditions, as she put it. The children are running wild or being taught by parents when they can spare the time. A spark of interest ignited in Fiona. How many children? About 30 of school age in town and nearby. More if you count the outlying ranches. Samuel studied her with new interest. Is that something you might consider? If you decide to stay, that is. Perhaps, Fiona said cautiously. Though I don't know how I'd support myself while getting a school established. Keep working for me until it's set up, Samuel offered immediately. The town council would probably provide a small stipend once classes begin. And there's a room above the schoolhouse where the teacher traditionally lives. The idea took root in Fiona's mind, a purpose, a way forward that didn't involve marrying a stranger or returning to Boston in disgrace. I'd need to think about it. Of course, Samuel nodded. No rush. See how you like Promise Creek first. As they finished their meal, more customers entered the cafe. Fiona noticed how several nodded respectfully to Samuel, though a few cast curious or disapproving glances their way. Hawkins, a tall, barrel-chested man with a silver star pinned to his vest, approached their table. Thought you should know Jenkins is in town. Saw you with the lady here and started asking questions. Samuel's expression tightened. Thanks for the warning, Sheriff. The sheriff tipped his hat to Fiona. Madam. Sheriff Donovan. Welcome to Promise Creek. Thank you, Sheriff. Fiona replied, forcing a smile despite the anxiety building in her chest at the mention of Jenkins. After he moved away, Samuel leaned forward. Don't worry about Jenkins. He made his choice. I'm not worried, Fiona said, though her trembling hands betrayed her. I just don't want a confrontation. Neither do I, Samuel agreed. But if it happens, remember you've done nothing wrong. You're not property to be claimed or rejected at his whim. His words warmed something inside her, a sense of dignity she'd nearly forgotten. Thank you? They had just paid for their meal and were preparing to leave when a red-faced man burst through the cafe door. He was expensively dressed for a rancher, with a fine coat and polished boots, though his florid complexion suggested he was no stranger to whiskey. There she is! He exclaimed loudly, pointing at Fiona. My mail-order bride, already taken up with the blacksmith. The cafe fell silent as every head turned toward them. Fiona felt her face burning with humiliation. Samuel rose slowly to his feet, positioning himself slightly in front of Fiona. Mr. Jenkins, I presume? Miss Baker received your note. You made your position clear. Jenkins swayed slightly, confirming Fiona's suspicion that he'd been drinking. Changed my mind again, he slurred. Decided I might want her after all. Paid good money for her passage. I am not a package to be returned, Fiona said, finding her voice despite her pounding heart. You rejected me before we even met. I've found employment elsewhere. With him? Jenkins sneered, gesturing at Samuel. What kind of employment exactly? Samuel's hands clenched into fists at his sides, but his voice remained steady. Miss Baker is my clerk and bookkeeper. Nothing more. Pretty convenient arrangement, Jenkins continued, his bloodshot eyes moving between them. Unmarried man, unmarried woman, living on the same property. That's enough, Jenkins, Sheriff Donovan interrupted, moving forward from where he'd been observing. You're drunk and making a fool of yourself. Go home to your new wife. Jenkins glared but seemed to deflate somewhat under the sheriff's stern gaze. Just making sure everyone knows what kind of woman she is, he muttered. The kind who deserves better than you, Samuel replied evenly. Now apologize to the lady. Jenkins gave a derisive laugh. I don't apologize to women who... He never finished the sentence. Samuel moved with surprising speed for such a large man, grabbing Jenkins by the collar and pushing him against the nearest wall. Apologize, he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. The cafe patrons watched in tense silence. The sheriff stepped closer but didn't intervene, seemingly willing to let the scene play out. Jenkins' face paled as he stared into Samuel's eyes. Whatever he saw there made him swallow hard. Sorry, he mumbled. Not to me, Samuel said. To Miss Baker. Jenkins turned his head slightly. Apologies, Miss Baker, he said without sincerity. Samuel released him with a slight shove. Now leave. And if I hear you've spoken a word against Miss Baker's character again, we'll have a different kind of conversation. Jenkins straightened his rumpled coat with as much dignity as he could muster and stalked out without another word. The cafe remained silent for a long moment before conversation slowly resumed, now with even more to gossip about. Fiona stood frozen, embarrassment and gratitude warring within her. I'm sorry about that, Samuel said quietly as he returned to her side. Are you all right? Yes, Fiona replied, though her voice shook slightly. Thank you for defending me. Let's get back to the smithy, he suggested, guiding her toward the door with a gentle hand at her elbow. Outside, the bright sunlight seemed at odds with the turbulent emotions churning inside her. They walked in silence until they were halfway back to the smithy. You shouldn't have threatened him, Fiona finally said, though there was no real reproach in her voice. Samuel glanced down at her. Probably not, he agreed. But I meant every word. Why? You barely know me. He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. Because no one deserves to be treated that way. Because my father spoke to my mother like that, and no one ever stood up for her. Because that bruise on your face tells me you've already endured enough disrespect to last a lifetime. The simple honesty in his words touched something deep inside Fiona. For the first time since arriving in Promise Creek, she felt as though she might have found not just employment or shelter, but an ally. "Thank you," she said again, meaning it more profoundly than before. Samuel nodded once, his expression softening. "Come on. We've got work to do." The afternoon passed in relative quiet. Word of the confrontation at the cafe had clearly spread, as several customers came by with transparent excuses to see the new woman working at the smithy. Samuel handled each intrusion with patient firmness, neither encouraging gossip nor allowing anyone to make Fiona uncomfortable. By evening, she had made significant progress on organizing the books and even discovered that several customers owed substantial sums that Samuel had never collected. "You're practically giving away your work," she observed as she showed him the figures. "Mr. Peterson hasn't paid for 3 repairs, and the Millers owe for a complete set of fireplace tools from last winter." Samuel rubbed his neck sheepishly. "Most folks around here are good for it eventually. Times are hard on some of the smaller ranches. Generosity is admirable, but you need to make a living too," Fiona pointed out. "I could draft some polite reminders, if you think it's necessary," he agreed, though he looked uncomfortable with the idea. As the sun began to set, Samuel closed up the smithy and walked Fiona back to the cabin. "I need to visit the Wilsons' ranch tomorrow. They have a plow that's too big to bring into town. Would you mind coming along? It's about an hour's ride." Fiona hesitated. "I haven't ridden in years. I have a gentle mare that would suit you, or you could ride in the wagon with me," he offered. "Might do you good to see more of the country." The thought of spending a day away from curious eyes in town was appealing. "I'll come," she decided. "Thank you for the invitation." Samuel smiled, transforming his serious face. "Good. We'll leave after breakfast." He bid her good night and headed toward his own quarters above the smithy. Alone in the cabin, Fiona carefully removed her dress and washed at the basin, wincing as she touched the bruise. It was healing slowly, the edges now turning yellowish. She changed into her nightgown and sat on the edge of the bed, reaching for her Bible. As she opened it, a folded letter fell from between the pages, the last letter her mother had written before the influenza took her. Fiona had read it so many times the creases were wearing thin, but she unfolded it once more, finding comfort in the familiar handwriting. "My dearest Fiona," it began. "Remember that God never closes a door without opening a window. Have faith in His plan for you, and in your own strength. You have always been braver than you believe yourself to be." Fiona traced her finger over the words, wondering what her mother would think of her current situation. Stranded in a frontier town, working for a blacksmith, contemplating becoming a teacher again, none of it was what she had expected when she left Boston. Yet for the first time in months, she felt a cautious sense of hope. Perhaps Promise Creek was her open window. Perhaps Samuel Hawkins, with his quiet strength and unexpected kindness, was part of a path she couldn't yet fully see. With that thought, she said her prayers and slipped beneath the covers, falling into a sleep unmarred by the nightmares that had plagued her since leaving Boston. Morning brought clear skies and a gentle breeze, perfect weather for a ride into the countryside. Fiona dressed in her plainest skirt and blouse, knowing they would be dusty by day's end. She hesitated over her hair, finally deciding to braid it simply down her back rather than pin it up as usual. When she arrived at the smithy, Samuel was already loading tools into a wagon hitched to a sturdy bay horse. A pretty chestnut mare stood nearby, saddled and waiting. "Good morning," Samuel called, smiling as he saw her. "Have you decided? Wagon or saddle?" Fiona eyed the mare thoughtfully. "I think I'll try riding, if you're sure she's gentle. Sugar wouldn't hurt a fly," Samuel assured her, offering a hand to help her mount. "She belonged to my sister, who wasn't much of a horsewoman either." His hand was warm and calloused as it closed around hers, and Fiona felt an unexpected flutter in her stomach at the contact. He boosted her easily into the saddle, his strength evident in the effortless way he lifted her. "Thank you," she murmured, settling her skirts and taking the reins. Samuel checked the mare's girth and stirrups before stepping back. Comfortable? Fiona nodded, memories of childhood riding lessons returning as she adjusted her posture. It had been years, but the basics came back quickly. Samuel climbed onto the wagon seat and clicked to his horse. Let's go, then. The Wilsons are expecting us. They headed out of town, following a well-worn trail that wound through gently rolling grasslands. The morning sun bathed everything in golden light, and Fiona found herself relaxing as they left the confines of Promise Creek behind. It's beautiful, she said, gazing at the distant mountains that framed the horizon. So open. Samuel nodded, looking around with evident appreciation. That's what I love about it. Room to breathe. Room to be yourself without everyone watching and judging. Is that why you became a blacksmith? To be independent? He considered the question. Partly. I apprenticed in Cheyenne after my father died. Found I had a knack for it. He glanced at her. There's something honest about working with iron. It doesn't lie to you or pretend to be something it's not. Treat it right with respect and understanding and it becomes exactly what it's meant to be. The simple philosophy resonated with Fiona. I felt that way about teaching, she admitted. Helping children discover what they could become. Tell me about your school in Boston. Samuel prompted, genuine interest in his voice. As they rode, Fiona found herself sharing stories of her students and the small achievements that had brought her joy as a teacher. Samuel listened attentively, asking questions that showed he valued her experience. In turn, he told her about growing up on a failing ranch with a father who drank away their profits, and a mother who never stopped trying to create a real home despite the hardships. She taught me to read by lamplight after my father passed out for the night, he recalled. Said education was the one thing no one could take from me. A shadow crossed his face. She died when I was 16. Pneumonia. I'm sorry, Fiona said softly. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was, Samuel agreed. I think that's why I reacted so strongly to Jenkins yesterday. She put up with too much from my father. I promised myself I'd never be that kind of man, and I'd never stand by while someone else was. The conversation flowed easily between them as they traveled, and Fiona found herself increasingly comfortable in Samuel's company. He had none of the polished manners of Boston gentlemen, but there was an authenticity to him that she found refreshing. After about an hour, they crested a small rise, and Samuel pointed ahead. Wilson's Ranch. Not the biggest spread, but Frank and Martha work harder than most. The ranch was modest, a sturdy log house, a barn, and several outbuildings surrounded by fenced pastures where cattle grazed. As they approached, a man emerged from the barn, waving and greeting. Right on time, Hawkins, he called. And you've brought company. Samuel introduced Fiona to Frank Wilson, a weathered man in his 40s with laugh lines around his eyes. Miss Baker is helping me get my business in order, he explained. About time someone did, Frank replied good-naturedly. Come on in. Martha's just made coffee. Inside the ranch house, they met Martha Wilson, a practical-looking woman with graying hair and a warm smile. 2 children, a boy of about 10 and a girl perhaps 7, peered at them curiously from the kitchen doorway. Those are our youngest, James and Sarah, Martha explained, serving coffee and fresh baked bread. Our older boys are out with the herd. The children were particularly fascinated by Fiona, especially Sarah, who eventually worked up the courage to approach. Are you a real teacher? She asked, having overheard the adults' conversation. I was in Boston, Fiona replied with a smile. And I might be again here in Promise Creek. Sarah's eyes widened. Really? Pa's been teaching us our letters, but he says he's not very good at it. He's right about that. Frank chuckled. Miss Baker, if you're considering starting a school, you'd have our support. These two need proper learning. As the adults discussed the possibility of reopening the school, Fiona found herself drawing the children into a simple spelling game at the kitchen table. Before long, Even Martha had joined in, revealing that she'd always wished she'd had more education herself. Samuel watched from across the room, a thoughtful expression on his face. When Fiona happened to meet his eyes, he gave her a smile that sent unexpected warmth through her. After coffee, the men went to examine the broken plow while Martha showed Fiona her garden. The older woman was delightful company, sharing knowledge of which plants thrived in Wyoming's climate, and which were too delicate for the harsh winters. "Samuel seems to think highly of you," Martha commented as they inspected a row of thriving tomato plants. Fiona felt her cheeks warm. "He's been very kind. I was in a difficult situation when I arrived." Martha nodded. "Word travels. Jenkins is a fool, if you don't mind my saying so." She gave Fiona a sideways glance. "Samuel's a good man. Best blacksmith in 3 counties and has a heart to match his size. Never understood why some local girl hasn't snapped him up. We're just working together," Fiona said carefully. "Of course," Martha replied, not quite hiding her smile. "Just thought you should know what kind of man he is. The kind who'd give you the shirt off his back but wouldn't presume to hold your hand without permission." Before Fiona could formulate a response, Frank called from the barn that they were finished with the plow. The remainder of the visit passed pleasantly, with promises to spread word about the potential reopening of the school. As they rode back toward Promise Creek in the late afternoon, Samuel seemed unusually quiet. "You were wonderful with those children," he finally said. "They took to you immediately." "I've missed teaching," Fiona admitted. "Seeing their faces light up when they understand something new, there's nothing quite like it." "I saw that today," Samuel nodded. "You belong in a classroom." He paused. "If you decide to stay and reopen the school, I'll help however I can. The building needs repairs, and there are supplies to consider." "That's very generous," Fiona said, touched by the offer. Samuel shrugged. "It's not entirely selfless. Promise Creek needs a school if it's going to grow. Children need education." He glanced at her. "And if you stay, I'd still have the best bookkeeper I've ever had." The compliment warmed her. "I haven't decided yet," she said, though she realized the idea of staying in Promise Creek was becoming increasingly appealing. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the setting sun painting the grasslands in shades of gold and amber. Fiona found her gaze drawn repeatedly to Samuel's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way the sunset highlighted the auburn tints in his brown hair. When he caught her looking, she quickly turned away, focusing on the trail ahead. But not before she saw the small smile that curved his lips. The next 2 weeks fell into a comfortable routine. Fiona continued organizing the Smithies' accounts, sending out polite but firm reminders to customers with outstanding debts. To Samuel's surprise, payments began arriving within days. "You have a gift," he told her after Mr. Peterson finally settled his long-overdue account. "You managed to ask for money without making him feel cornered." "It's all in the wording," Fiona explained. "People respond better to respect than demands." In the evenings, Samuel often walked her to the cabin, lingering to talk about the day or share stories from their pasts. Fiona found herself looking forward to these conversations, each one revealing another layer of the thoughtful man beneath the blacksmith's exterior. She also began exploring the idea of reopening the school more seriously. Sheriff Donovan introduced her to the town council members, who were enthusiastic about having a qualified teacher again. The schoolhouse needed work: broken windows, a leaking roof, and desks in disrepair, but the council promised funds for basic repairs. True to his word, Samuel offered his skills for the renovation work. "I can fix the roof and windows," he said when they inspected the building together. "Maybe build some new desks too." "You've already done so much for me," Fiona protested. "I can't ask for more." "You're not asking. I'm offering," Samuel replied simply. "Besides, I was serious about Promise Creek needing a school. This isn't just for you." Despite his words, Fiona noticed how his gaze lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking. She found herself increasingly aware of his presence, the sound of his voice, the scent of iron and leather that clung to him, the gentleness in hands strong enough to bend metal. The bruise on her face had faded to a barely noticeable yellow shadow, and with it, some of her wariness began to recede as well. Promise Creek was starting to feel less like a temporary refuge and more like a place she might belong. One Saturday afternoon, about 3 weeks after her arrival, Samuel closed the smithy early. "I have something to show you," he said, a hint of excitement in his voice. "Can you be ready for a ride in 30 minutes? Curious, Fiona agreed. When she emerged from the cabin half an hour later, she found Samuel waiting with Sugar and his own horse, a tall black gelding named Thunder. "Where are we going?" she asked as he helped her mount. "You'll see," he replied with a mysterious smile. "It's not far." They rode north of town, following a narrow trail that wound through a stand of cottonwood trees alongside a small creek. After about 20 minutes, the trees opened to reveal a small meadow nestled against a rocky outcropping. Wildflowers dotted the grass in splashes of purple, yellow, and white. "It's beautiful," Fiona said, breathing in the sweet scent of the blossoms. Samuel dismounted and tied both horses to a tree before helping Fiona down. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and she felt a flutter of awareness at his touch. "This is my thinking spot," he explained, leading her toward a flat rock overlooking the meadow. "I come here when I need to clear my head or make important decisions." They sat side by side on the sun-warmed stone. Below them, the creek gurgled over smooth stones, and birds called from the trees. The peace of the place was palpable. "Thank you for sharing it with me," Fiona said softly. Samuel nodded, seeming suddenly nervous. "I wanted to talk to you about something." He took a deep breath. "The school is almost ready. The council says classes can start next month." "Yes," Fiona agreed, wondering at his serious tone. "I'm excited to begin teaching again." "Which means you'll be moving into the teachers' quarters above the school." Understanding dawned. "You've come to rely on my help at the smithy," she said. "I can still maintain your books, even after I start teaching. Perhaps not every day, but that's not it," Samuel interrupted gently. He turned to face her fully, his blue eyes intent. "Fiona, these past weeks have been. I've never." He shook his head in frustration. "I'm not good with words." Fiona's heart began beating faster as she realized where the conversation might be heading. "Samuel?" He took her hand in his touch warm and steady. "I know you came here expecting to marry one man, and instead found yourself working for another. I know you've had reasons to be wary of men's intentions. But I need to tell you I've come to care for you. Deeply." Fiona sat very still, emotions washing over her in waves. Fear, hope, uncertainty, longing all tangled together. "You don't have to say anything now," Samuel continued quickly. "I don't expect anything. I wanted you to know how I feel before you make your decision about staying in Promise Creek." He swallowed hard. "If your plans don't include me, I understand. But if there's any chance..." "Samuel." Fiona finally found her voice. "I care for you too." Hope blazed in his eyes. "You do?" She nodded, squeezing his hand. "You've shown me nothing but kindness and respect from the moment I arrived. You defended me when no one else would. You've helped me build a new beginning here." She took a deep breath. "But I'm afraid." "Of what?" "Of making another mistake. Of trusting too quickly." She touched her cheek where the bruise had been. "Of being vulnerable again." Samuel's expression softened. "I would never hurt you, Fiona. Not intentionally. I can't promise I'll never make mistakes or say the wrong thing, but I can promise to always respect you, to listen to you, to treat you as an equal." "I believe you," Fiona said, surprised to realize she truly did. "But I need time. This is all happening so fast." "Take all the time you need," Samuel assured her. "I'm not going anywhere." A smile tugged at his lips. "Blacksmiths tend to put down roots." Fiona found herself smiling back. Thank you for understanding. May I ask one thing? Samuel said, his expression growing serious again. Of course. May I court you properly? While you're deciding? His eyes held hers steadily. No pressure, no expectations. Just getting to know each other better. Warmth spread through Fiona's chest at the simple, heartfelt request. Yes, she answered. I'd like that very much. Relief and joy transformed Samuel's face. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, but true to his word, he simply squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. They sat together as the afternoon sun began its descent, talking easily about their hopes for the future, the school, the smithy, the town's growth. When they finally rode back to Promise Creek, something had shifted between them, a new awareness, a sense of possibility that hadn't existed before. That night, Fiona opened her Bible to a different passage than usual. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. For the first time since leaving Boston, she allowed herself to truly believe those words might be true. The following weeks brought a flurry of activity, as the schoolhouse renovation neared completion and word spread about classes beginning. Parents began registering their children, and Fiona found herself creating lesson plans and organizing supplies with growing excitement. True to his word, Samuel courted her with respectful attention. Nothing ostentatious. Promise Creek offered few opportunities for grand gestures, but his thoughtfulness showed in countless small ways. Fresh wildflowers appearing on her desk in the morning. A beautifully crafted iron bookmark for her Bible. An invitation to Sunday dinner with friends from town. Each gesture reinforced what Fiona was coming to believe, that Samuel Hawkins was exactly the man he appeared to be, honest, honorable, and genuinely good-hearted. The day before the school was to open, Samuel helped Fiona move her few belongings from the cabin to the teachers' quarters above the schoolhouse. The space was small but newly refurbished, with fresh paint and curtains donated by the ladies of the church. It feels strange, Fiona admitted as they carried the last box up the narrow stairs. I've grown accustomed to the cabin. You can always come back, Samuel said quietly. Any time. Their eyes met, and Fiona felt the now familiar flutter in her chest. Over the weeks of his courtship, her feelings had deepened from gratitude and friendship to something more profound. She found herself thinking of him constantly, noticing things that reminded her of him, looking forward to every moment in his company. I should get back to the smithy, Samuel said, though he made no move to leave. You'll need rest before tomorrow. Stay for tea? Fiona suggested impulsively. To celebrate the school's opening? Samuel's smile was answer enough. They sat at the small table by the window, drinking tea and watching the sunset paint the town in golden light. Their conversation flowed easily, punctuated by comfortable silences that needed no filling. As Samuel finally prepared to leave, he paused at the door. Fiona, He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. I made something for you. For tomorrow. He handed her a small object wrapped in a clean handkerchief. Fiona unwrapped it carefully to reveal a delicate iron bell with a wooden handle, perfectly sized for a teacher's desk. It's beautiful, she breathed, running her finger over the smooth metal. I thought you might need it to call the children to order, Samuel explained. Though from what I've seen, you probably won't have trouble keeping their attention. Fiona impulsively rose on tiptoe and pressed a kiss to his cheek. Thank you. It's perfect. Samuel's eyes widened in surprise, then softened as he looked down at her. May I? He asked quietly, his gaze dropping to her lips. Heart pounding, Fiona nodded. Samuel gently cupped her face in his hands and lowered his mouth to hers in a kiss so tender it brought tears to her eyes. His lips were warm and sure against hers, the kiss conveying everything words couldn't express. When they finally drew apart, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Fiona Baker, he whispered. I think I've loved you since I saw you standing alone at the stagecoach, holding that Bible like it was the only thing keeping you upright. Tears spilled down Fiona's cheeks as the words she'd been afraid to acknowledge even to herself finally found voice. I love you too, Samuel. I was so afraid to trust again, but you've shown me what love is supposed to be. He kissed her again, deeper this time, his arms encircling her waist to draw her closer. Fiona melted against him, feeling for the first time in her life that she had truly come home. When Samuel finally left, promising to attend the school's opening the next morning, Fiona stood at the window watching until he disappeared from view. Her fingers touched her lips, still tingling from his kisses, as she marveled at how completely her life had transformed in the span of a few short weeks. The mail-order bride who had arrived in Promise Creek with nothing but a bruise and a Bible had found something she hadn't dared to hope for, not just safety or security, but love. Real love, built on respect and kindness, with a man whose strength was matched by his gentleness. The following morning dawned clear and bright, a perfect day for new beginnings. Fiona dressed carefully in her best dress and pinned her hair in a neat bun before descending to the classroom to make final preparations. By 8 o'clock, children began arriving with their parents, filling the room with excited chatter. Fiona greeted each one personally, learning names and ages as they chose their seats. By 8:30, 32 students ranging from 6 to 16 years old had assembled, along with many parents who wanted to witness the school's opening. Samuel stood at the back of the room, pride evident in his eyes as he watched Fiona welcome the community. When everyone had settled, she picked up the iron bell from her desk and rang it gently. The clear, sweet tone brought immediate silence. Good morning, she began, her teacher's voice steady and warm. I'm Miss Baker, and I'm honored to be your teacher. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for Promise Creek, and I'm grateful to everyone who helped make this day possible. Her eyes found Samuel's, and the love shining there gave her confidence. Education is a gift, one that can never be taken from you. It opens doors and builds futures. My own teacher once told me that learning is the greatest adventure we can undertake, and I believe that with all my heart. The first day of school passed in a blur of activity, assessing students' knowledge, establishing routines, and beginning the process of building a learning community. By the time the last child left in the afternoon, Fiona was exhausted but exhilarated. Samuel appeared at her classroom door as she was straightening desks. Congratulations, Miss Baker, he said with a smile. From what I hear, you've already won over every child in town. It's a good beginning, Fiona agreed, returning his smile. They're eager to learn. I brought something to celebrate. Samuel produced a small basket containing bread, cheese, and a bottle of cider. I thought you might be too tired to cook. The simple thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Fiona deeply. You know me so well already. They shared the impromptu picnic at her desk, talking about the day's events and plans for the school. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the classroom windows, Samuel grew quiet. What are you thinking? Fiona asked, noticing his pensive expression. Samuel took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I'm thinking about how different my life is since you stepped off that stagecoach. How much brighter everything seems. I feel the same way, Fiona admitted. When I left Boston, I thought I was running away from something. I never imagined I might be running towards something better. Fiona, Samuel said, his voice suddenly serious. I know we haven't known each other long, and I promise to give you time. But I find myself wondering, hoping if you might have made your decision. Her heart quickened as she realized what he was asking. About us? Samuel nodded, his blue eyes intent on hers. I love you. I want to build a life with you if you'll have me. Fiona looked at this man who had shown her what true strength looked like, not the power to control or intimidate, but the courage to be gentle, to respect, to protect without possessing. The man who had seen her at her most vulnerable and offered not pity but partnership. Yes, she said simply, joy bubbling up inside her. My answer is yes. The smile that broke across Samuel's face was like sunrise. He pulled her to her feet and into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally separated, He pressed his forehead to hers. "I don't have a ring yet," he confessed. "I wanted to be sure before I had one made." "I don't need a ring," Fiona assured him. "Just you." "Nevertheless, you'll have one," Samuel promised. "And a proper wedding, whenever you're ready." "No rush." Fiona thought for a moment. "What about Christmas?" "That gives us 3 months to prepare, and the school will have a holiday break." "Christmas it is," Samuel agreed, his eyes shining. "I can't think of a better gift than making you my wife." Word of their engagement spread quickly through Promise Creek, met with general approval and only a few raised eyebrows at the speed of their courtship. Martha Wilson was particularly delighted, confiding to Fiona that she'd known from the first day Samuel brought her to the ranch that they were perfectly suited. The following months passed in a whirlwind of teaching, planning, and stolen moments together. Samuel continued his work at the smithy while helping Fiona with school projects. Together, they began dreaming of their future, perhaps expanding the smithy, adding rooms to the cabin for a growing family, building a life centered on the values they shared. 2 weeks before the wedding, an unexpected letter arrived for Fiona from Harold Jenkins' new wife, of all people. Curiosity overcame her initial hesitation, and she opened it to find a brief but surprising message. "Miss Baker, I write to thank you, though you may find it strange. Had Harold not rejected you, I would never have become his wife, and despite his faults, our marriage has brought me security I desperately needed as a widow with a young child. I understand you have found happiness with the blacksmith. Perhaps things work out as they should, even when the path seems cruel at first. Wishing you well, Margaret Jenkins." Fiona showed the letter to Samuel that evening as they sat by the fire in his quarters above the smithy, where they often spent quiet evenings together. "Remarkable," he said after reading it. "She's right, though. If Jenkins hadn't been such a fool, you might never have stayed in Promise Creek. And I would never have found you," Fiona added softly. "Sometimes I think about how many things had to happen exactly as they did, even the painful parts, to bring us together." Samuel took her hand, kissing her palm gently. "I'm grateful for every step that brought you here, though I wish you hadn't had to suffer along the way." "The suffering makes the joy sweeter," Fiona said, believing it truly for the first time. "Like refining metal in your forge." Samuel smiled at the comparison. "Speaking of which, I have something for you." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. "I was going to wait until Christmas Eve, but I'd like you to have it now." Fiona opened the pouch and gasped softly as a ring slid into her palm. It was unlike any engagement ring she had seen in Boston, not a diamond in a conventional setting, but a unique creation clearly crafted by Samuel's own hands. A band of polished silver held a small, perfect pearl, surrounded by delicate ironwork that resembled intertwining vines. "Samuel, it's exquisite," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Did you make this?" He nodded, a hint of uncertainty in his expression. "I know it's not a traditional diamond, it's perfect," Fiona interrupted, slipping it onto her finger. "More meaningful than any store-bought ring could ever be." Relief and pleasure washed over his face as he gathered her into his arms. "I wanted something as unique as you are. Something that represented both of us, the pearl for your quiet strength, the iron for my work, the silver binding us together." "I'll treasure it always," Fiona promised, kissing him softly. On Christmas Eve, 1876, Fiona stood in the back of Promise Creek's small church, hardly able to believe the transformation of her life in just 4 short months. The church was decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons, candles casting a warm glow over the gathered townspeople. Martha Wilson had helped her prepare, lending a beautiful cream-colored dress that she had carefully altered to fit Fiona perfectly. Her hair was arranged simply, adorned only with a sprig of holly berries, and in her hands she carried her beloved Bible along with a small bouquet of winter flowers from Martha's greenhouse. As the first notes of music began, Fiona took a deep breath and stepped into the aisle. Her eyes immediately found Samuel standing at the altar, looking handsome and somewhat awestruck in a new suit. The love shining in his eyes as he watched her approach made her heart swell with joy. The ceremony was simple but profound. They exchanged traditional vows, their voices steady and sure, before adding personal promises they had written together. "I promise to respect your mind, honor your strength, and cherish your heart," Samuel said, holding both her hands in his. "To build with you a home filled with love, learning, and laughter. To be your partner in all things for all days. I promise to stand beside you in joy and in sorrow," Fiona responded, her voice clear despite the emotion tightening her throat. "To share your burdens and celebrate your triumphs. To create with you a life of purpose, compassion, and devotion. To be your wife, your friend, and your equal in all things, for all days." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed her with such tenderness that tears spilled down her cheeks. The congregation erupted in applause as they turned to face their friends and neighbors, no longer the blacksmith and the teacher, but Mr. and Mrs. Hawkins, beginning their life together. The celebration afterward was joyous, a community feast in the church hall with music, dancing, and more good wishes than Fiona could have imagined. Even Sheriff Donovan unbent enough to offer a toast to their happiness. Late that night, Samuel carried Fiona across the threshold of the cabin, their home now, expanded and improved over the past months with a larger bedroom and a proper study where Fiona could prepare her lessons. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hawkins," he said softly, setting her on her feet but keeping his arms around her waist. "It's been home since the day you brought me here," Fiona replied, reaching up to touch his face. "You've been home." Their kiss deepened, passion and tenderness mingling as they began their life as husband and wife. In Samuel's gentle embrace, Fiona found the peace and love she had never dared to dream might be hers. 5 years later, Fiona sat on the porch of their expanded home, watching Samuel play with their 3-year-old son, James, while their infant daughter, Elizabeth, slept in her cradle nearby. The smithy had prospered under their joint management, and the school had grown to require a second teacher to assist Fiona, who now taught only part-time while raising their children. Promise Creek had grown too, nearly doubling in size as the railway brought more settlers west. Through all the changes, Samuel and Fiona's partnership had remained the stable center of their lives, a marriage built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and deepening love. As the sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Samuel came to sit beside her on the porch swing, lifting James onto his lap. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, slipping an arm around her shoulders. Fiona leaned into his embrace, contentment filling her heart. "I was thinking about that first day stepping off the stagecoach with nothing but my Bible and the clothes on my back. How terrified I was." Samuel kissed her temple gently. "And now? Now I have everything I never knew I wanted," she replied, looking at their children, their home, the life they had built together. "Sometimes I still can't believe how blessed I am." "We're the blessed ones," Samuel corrected, squeezing her hand. "You make us better, me, the children, the whole town." James wiggled down from his father's lap to investigate a butterfly that had landed on the porch railing. As they watched their sons wonder at the simple miracle, Fiona thought of the words she had read so many times in her darkest moments. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." The bruised and frightened woman who had arrived in Promise Creek clutching her Bible was gone, transformed by love into someone stronger, braver, and more joyful than she had ever imagined possible. In her place sat Fiona Hawkins, teacher, wife, mother, beloved. She turned to her husband, the man who had seen her value when she could not see it herself, and kissed him softly. "I love you, Samuel Hawkins." His smile, still as heart-stopping as the first time she'd seen it, warmed her to her core. "And I love you, Fiona Hawkins. Today, tomorrow, and all the days after." As the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, they sat together in peaceful silence, surrounded by the life they had created, a life built on faith, courage, and the transformative power of love freely given and gratefully received.